episode number 6, with world record-setting freediver Mandy Rae Krack. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Mandy Rae Krack. Mandy Rae is an accomplished freediver based in Vancouver, British Columbia. She holds 7 freediving world records and 13 national records. She also owns Performance Freediving International, where she teaches freediving courses to the general public. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So now that I've introduced you, I've probably got a ton of people scratching their heads, wondering what the heck freediving is. So why don't you start off by explaining?
Well, I guess essentially freediving is like deep snorkeling. So on a single breath, you see how deep you can go, how many lengths in a pool you could go, or how long you could float and hold your breath for.
Let's go way back in time. You took to the water pretty early in life. I read that you competed in synchronized swimming when I think you were just 9 years old when you started that.
Yeah.
You got scuba certified when you were 15. So What is it about the water that you find so rewarding?
It just feels more comfortable to me. I'm not sure why, but I'm much more clumsy on land and just don't quite. There's never been a sport that I found that fits on land, but when I'm in the water, it feels good. And it just, from the first time I saw a synchro, I was like, that's what I want to do. And I jumped in full head, like right into it and did it competitively for 4 years. And then I started hearing about scuba diving and thought, oh my God, I need to get underwater and see all of the stuff that's down there. And that's what drew me in initially to scuba, and then changed it up into freediving when I realized, you don't actually need to have tanks on. You can enjoy it better without.
Let's talk about that. Freediving, you essentially hold your breath while plunging into great depths. What is it that's so compelling about it? What's the allure of freediving to you?
Initially I got into freediving for the competitive side of it. It was my love of being underwater combined with my strong competitive side. And the two of those things together are perfect for me for freediving, because it's not that you necessarily have to compete against anyone else. You could just be doing it recreationally. And every time you go out, you add an extra few seconds onto your breath hold or an extra meter of depth. And you keep thinking, wow, I did it. I wonder how much further I could go. And it kind of eggs you on. So that's what drew me initially. And then after working on the cove and the environmental side and just learning to enjoy what you're seeing and the interactions, that's the part that has me now.
I've heard there's some sense of euphoria when you're down there. Just being down there, the weightlessness, the surroundings, being where no one else has been before, different environment. What's it like down there? Describe just being down at great depths.
And that it's weird at the world record depths. You're not thinking about how you feel when you're down there. I think it's like interviewers' nightmare interviewing me when they ask me, so what are you thinking about when you're down there? What are you feeling? And when you're on a world record dive, you get into this flow state. So nothing else exists on there. You're not thinking about, you don't have these regular thoughts in your head. You're thinking about the technique that you need to be using to get to that part of the dive. And it's all compartmentalized on the way down and on the way back up. So, I really can't tell you what I see or what I feel. It's just peaceful. It feels very peaceful. And I just have this dialogue going in my head. And that's all I remember on the dives.
So when you're diving down to depths of close to 500 feet while holding your breath for several minutes, not only do you have the lack of oxygen, but the pressure on your body that far down is enormous. We're talking like 15 times the pressure at sea level. So physiologically speaking, how can you do that? How does your body adapt to that?
Luckily, we're pretty much all water filled and water's incompressible. So there's only a few air spaces in your body that need to be equalized. The rest of you doesn't notice the difference because it's all water fluid filled. So you have your lungs, obviously, and the all the systems going down into your lungs, your trachea and that are compressible or semi-compressible air spaces, your ears and your sinuses. So it's just really learning the techniques to equalize those and becoming flexible enough in your thoracic area so that your lungs and trachea can compress as much as possible without causing any injury.
Easier said than done.
No, it's pretty easy.
There's something called the mammalian dive reflex. Could you explain what that means?
Mammalian diving reflex is something that we have in common. They're reflexes that we humans have in common with like whales, seals, and dolphins. So there's stuff like the bradycardic response, so slowing of the heart rate when you're immersed in water. And there's a fine line in that. Like I'm up in Vancouver Island area, so the water here is very cold. So it does, immersing your face in the water does help slow down your heart rate, but it can also cause you to shiver and use up more oxygen too. So you kind of have this balance in it. But just being immersed in water usually helps slow your heart rate down. You also have stuff like blood shunt. Your body will actually shunt blood to your extremities, forcing more blood flow to the core to protect your vital organs. So in trained freedivers, they found that we have higher cerebral blood flow at the end of a breath hold than at the beginning. And that's because of a vasodilation that happens. All this extra blood is forced to our core, and you have this vasodilation. So even though we have less oxygen in our system, we have higher blood flow to the brain. Therefore, we're able to utilize what oxygen we do have. Splenic contraction is a really cool one too, where being immersed in water, your spleen will actually contract, putting out more red blood cells, and red blood cells are what carry your oxygen. So really cool things like that. And one other one, the first one besides bradycardic that I really remember feeling was thoracic filling. And with thoracic filling, like I said, our lungs are compressible, but they compress to a certain point. And then this is kind of in simple terms, but we pull some plasma into our lungs because that would be a liquid and it's incompressible, and it helps prevent too much compression in the lungs. And it's weird because you'll come up from a really deep dive and you'll feel like you have a bit of a chest cold. And within about 5-10 minutes, it all dissipates back into your system and you're same as normal. But it's something that Weddell seals will induce, several times a day, every time they dive.
It's essentially a survival reflex, it sounds like.
Our body's just adapting to withstand the pressures. Yeah, it's just the more you do it, the more your body adapts. And, who knows where a human limit is, what the human potential is, because our bodies, we figure out new ways to train, new equipment, and our bodies figure out how to adapt better and faster to what we're doing. And we just keep getting better and better at it.
Let's talk about the pre-dive prep. You're in the water and you're getting ready to go down. I'm sure there's a physical and a mental component. I want to talk about the physical, and we'll come back to the mental. The slowing down the heart rate, the filling up the lungs. Talk about that process and what you're doing right before you do your dive.
Well, at the beginning of the dive, you're getting your body slowly adapted to what you're about to do. So we have, in competitive free diving, we have a 45-minute warm-up period we're allowed before a competition dive. And usually the start of the 45 minutes, you get in the water and you do a 5-minute facial immersion. So that's just taking your mask off and just floating face down in the water with your snorkel in and doing really slow, relaxed breathing to help slow your heart rate down, both by using the breathing, because the way you breathe will affect your heart rate. So we slow it down with a certain type of breathing. We use the effects of the immersion of water across our face to help slow our heart rate down. And you just do that for 5 minutes. Then we put our mask on and we start doing some easy pull down dives. So no fast swimming. You're just grabbing a line and pulling yourself down and then hanging out down there for a little bit. And it just holding your breath for gradual extended periods of time will help kick in all these mammalian diving reflexes. So when your 45 minutes is up and it's your turn to do your one big deep dive, your body's ready. Even though you haven't been even close to that depth, your body's now ready for the dive.
Let's talk about the mental side of things. I heard you once say that when you're in the water about to dive, that you need to become part of the water. Become part of the water. What do you mean by that?
Well, you have to take yourself from being a land-based human to a marine animal, a marine mammal. So you have to make all these physiological changes, like the slowing of the heart, the splenic contraction, all of this. You have to induce all of that so that you now belong in the water. And it's a great transformation. Once you get really comfortable and you do your routine enough times, your body starts to realize a compensatory change. Your body realizes what's about to happen, and it kicks in those reflexes even stronger and even faster. And you literally feel like my husband Kirk always says, you feel like you're an ice cube melting into the ocean. You know, you just feel like all of a sudden, you could stay down here forever.
And so these physical shifts are somewhat causing a mental shift, if you will. Like, are you almost viewing yourself in a different light when you're about to go down?
You definitely feel the difference. And I think they're all, in any sport, I think, when an athlete's getting ready for a big performance, you have these routines and rituals that you do that not only are helping to get your body ready physically for what they're about to go through, but it gets to your mental state as well. And so you think you're doing it for physical reasons, but it's actually prepping you mentally for what you're about to do. And, you know, once you got the physical side down, the mental is a huge one to overcome that a lot of people have a lot of trouble with. So, yeah, it's a special moment when you're able to master both.
Professional skiers, rock climbers, I'm sure plenty of others, they talk about going through their races, their routes in their heads before they actually perform it. Do you mentally go through your dive before you submerge yourself?
Oh, for sure. Visualization is a huge part of the pregame preparation. And I would usually do it at least twice the right before. Usually when I wake up in the morning, I would lay down after doing my head to toe stretches, and I would do a full visualization. So it's not just thinking of what you're going to do. It's actually feeling like you're doing that dive. So you with your eyes closed, you can see where you are in the water. You can hear what it sounds like to be there. You remember all these little details. And I would do it once right after I stretch before I even leave the house. And then I do it again while I'm doing my 5-minute facial immersion. So I'm going through it, and I never make it perfect because my dives are never perfect. So I always throw in whatever my most common issue is that I'm having on the dives. I always make sure I throw that problem in, but I throw it in with me being able to solve the problem too. So if it's my left ear isn't quite equalizing as quick as my right one, that goes into my visualization. So when it happens on the actual dive, I've already figured out how to deal with it, and it doesn't increase my heart rate or startle me. It's just part of the dive, and it's already been planned in, and it's already been solved, and you move past it.
So you walk through all these what-if scenarios ahead of time. You know the things that can go wrong, and you sit there before it happens and say, okay, how am I going to triage this situation or that situation?
Yeah, and then I found that it just didn't startle me. Because the last thing you want when you're a few hundred feet down is to get startled by something and your heart rate increases, right?
Well, and that's my next question, and maybe you partially answered it, which is how in the world do you not panic? I mean, you're way down there. You desperately need to breathe.
But you don't desperately need to breathe, though. That's the thing. You when you're down there, you don't have the urge to breathe. And that's partially physics coming into play with the partial pressures of the gases. Your body actually thinks it has way more oxygen than it actually might have. So you feel fine when you're down there. It's the pressure that you're feeling. So when your lungs are compressing, sometimes you feel an increased pressure on your chest. So that's usually the only negative kind of pressure that you feel. And there's training to help relieve that. But that's usually the only thing you feel. But that urge to breathe, you don't feel that. Not if you're doing it right.
Right. So maybe you don't feel the pressure to breathe, but you feel the actual physical pressure. Certainly everything has to go somewhat according to plan, and there's not a lot of margin for error in this sport. Does the calmness under pressure, and I don't mean the physical pressure, I just mean the fact that what you're doing here, does that come naturally, or is it just with a lot of repetition and a lot of practice that you get more and more calm?
Yeah, you definitely, it's something you have to figure out. It was years after I did my last record that I found out that the way I was doing it was by getting myself into a state of flow where you can focus almost 100% of your mental abilities into what you're doing. So you don't have these outside distractions or anything like that. And it made all the difference in the world. When I first decided I was going to go for the constant ballast record, that's wearing a fin and swimming down to depth and back up. I would go out for my training days, and some days I would be like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. And, the dives went just as planned, and I was calm mentally, and everything worked. And there's other days when it was like, oh my God, okay, just get out there, do the dive, just touch the depth, just make it happen. It can be ugly. It doesn't matter. Just make it happen and get this depth done. And, it's just some days you're mentally in it. Some days you're not. When I started training myself more with visualization and whatnot, visualization was a big thing for me. Then all of a sudden I had a internal dialogue that would play on the dives, because I found as soon as I had dead space in my head, those voices of just do it would get in there. And then you'd have, we call it the evil monkey, would start saying, ooh, what's that feeling? I don't think that's quite right. Maybe you should turn around. And you have that split second of doubt in your head, and within seconds you'll turn yourself around and head up to the surface and mess up your dive. You didn't hit your target depth. And so it was being able to control those internal voices and get yourself into this state where all you have is this internal dialogue coaching you through your dive. And once you had that and there was no dead space with evil monkeys screaming bad things at you, the possibilities were endless. Like, you felt confident, you were ready for it. It's like night and day. And you can see it in people when you go to competitions. You can see the people that have that down and the people that don't.
I mean, despite all the training and all the practice, certainly there's still risks to this. Do you accept the fact that, look, this is an extreme sport, and hand in hand with the thrills of the sport come serious and potentially fatal consequences? Or do you feel that it's mostly in your control, and with enough practice, there's minimal risks?
I think that in the eyes of the general public and the media, it's this dangerous extreme sport because we're holding our breath and we're swimming as far away from air as possible. And that's, for a lot of people, that's like one of your primal fears, not being able to breathe, suffocation. When you get into the sport of it, especially doing it competitively, you see all of the safety protocols that are in place. Like, there's at least 4 different safety protocols in place every time you do a dive. So if one fails, then you've got 3 others in hand, and it's all of these backups that make you know that you're totally fine. I've had 14 blackouts underwater. But all of them are just learning experiences. I hear about world-class skiers and snowboarders that, they're the best in their field, yet you have an off day and you have a wipeout and you end up in hospital for weeks. The worst I've ever had is maybe a little tracheal squeeze. And you're good a week later, like not even. Burst my eardrum once on a dive, but 2 days later I was teaching again. So, in any sport you have your risks, and it's all about making sure you know what they are and mitigating those and minimizing them so that you're not you're not putting yourself in undue risk. So if something does go wrong, like you black out, you know that you're good. And that helps you mentally too relax and know that you can push yourself because these other people around you have you covered.
So all that being said, I'm assuming it's a very small freediving community. And researching for this interview, I saw that there were several high-profile deaths. People that were experienced, well-accomplished, lots of world record holders. I'm sure you know some of these folks. Is there a lot of postmortem analysis on what went wrong and how do we take that into account so it doesn't happen to us? Were they pushing the envelope too far?
Well, the freedive community, like the number of people that freedive in the world is huge, enormous, but they're not all certified. So it's hard to get certain numbers. The competitive side of it is definitely smaller, and those that do world records is very small. But that being said, there's less than a handful of people since I started in 2000 that have died from it. There's a French guy, Loic, Audrey, Nick. There's probably like 3, maybe 4 that have died doing a world record attempt. That's not a lot. Think of how many people die in other sports every year. Like, that's a really small amount. And these are just the people that are really, really pushing it. And in all of those ones, you can see where the safety protocols failed. Audrey was a very publicized one back in 2003, I think is when she passed away. And they had her and her husband had safety protocols, but because nothing had ever happened, they kept stripping them down. Like, oh, we don't need that because it's never happened and that's expensive. We don't need this because this has happened. And, it just keeps...
So the governing body doesn't mandate certain safety protocols. It's up to
they
divers.
weren't doing it through a governing body. That's the thing. They were a husband and wife team that was organizing their own record attempt. They weren't through the international organization. So that was very different. There was Nick, who was doing it at a competition that was organized properly. The issues with that, he personally was pushing himself way beyond what he should have. And even though he should have stopped diving because of what had been happening to him in previous days, he didn't. It was just a strong competitive drive in him. And then there were some medical things that happened that weren't resolved probably as well as they should have been. So his was very unfortunate. There was French diver whose sled got hung up at depth, and the safety there wasn't able to retrieve him in time. So it's all breakdown of a few things or personal ambition getting in your way. You have to be smart about anything, and doing it in steps and pieces. But, for those few people that have had issues, what happened to them was well documented and reviewed, and new safety procedures were put in place. And, every time it's happened, people have learned from it and created more safety precautions to put in place so that it won't happen again.
There's something I read about called shallow water blackout. You mentioned you had several blackouts yourself. What exactly is that? And is that more for these recreational folks, or does that happen at competition levels?
Happens at all levels. Whenever you're doing free diving, where you're holding your breath, you slowly become hypoxic. And so if you do it, eventually, it doesn't matter to what level you do it, eventually you always have a chance of having a blackout. And one thing we've tried to change through the company Performance Freediving, PFI, is, and our training is that shallow water blackout, that was a term coined by the U.S. Navy for rebreather divers, oxygen rebreather divers, because they would black out near the surface. And then when freedivers, would happen to them, people said, oh, that's like shallow water blackout. Completely different reasons for having it happen. So when we teach our programs, we tell people the different ways that blackouts can happen, the different causes of it, and how to minimize the chances of those happening, and then how to deal with them when they do, because eventually they will happen. And the number one thing that people don't do is they don't dive with direct supervision of a trained buddy. They decide, like spear fishermen, they'll be like, a few of them get on a boat, go out for the day. They all jump in the ocean and head their own way because they don't want their friend to catch their fish or scare their fish away. But then when they do have a hypoxic situation, there's nobody there to hold their head out of the water. And that's all it really needs, making it as simple as possible. That's what needs to be done. You black out. As long as your airway is exposed to air, you'll come around and start breathing again. But because they have nobody there watching them, they end up drowning. So, that it's something as simple as that people just don't know because they think, I'm not pushing myself. I'm not doing anything like setting a world record. I'm not at risk. And if you do the sport, you're always at risk. You're always at risk of falling down if you're skiing,
Right, right. What's the scariest moment you've ever had? All your dives, is there any one moment that comes back again and again to sort of haunt you?
Yeah, there's one. In my last time I attempted a world record, I was attempting 90 meters, and I got the flu a week before. The competition was ending and I was doing it in a competition. So I kept taking time off and trying to recover. And the last day came and it was like, well, my last chance to get the record in. And so I went for it. And I remember turning around at depth and I did a few kicks and all of a sudden I felt this strange tingle. And I was like, that's not good. And I don't know why I thought it wasn't good because I just never felt it before. And I got up, kept swimming, and I met up with my husband, who is my primary deep free dive safety. And he always would give me an okay sign. And usually I'd like stick my tongue out at him or give him an okay back with my hand above my head or something simple. And this time I went, just sort of tilted my head to the side like, something's not quite right. And he moved in closer and he asked me again. And then I blacked out. And I ended up having, they're really not sure. It was kind of like a mini
How far
stroke.
down were you?
I think I blacked out about 10 meters before the surface, so it wasn't deep anymore. I made most of the dive. But then I ended up having paralysis down my left side. But by the time and it was really quick to get into shore to the ambulance. And by the time I got to shore, I could walk off the boat again, even though I couldn't get on the boat or, talking was hard. So there was that. And, but I've had full workups. The researchers loved it because they had to do a lot of research on me, and there's no effects of whatever it was that happened, and everything is fine with my brain and my lungs and everything like that. And I've never had another episode, but I did learn that if I'm not 100% well, I am not going to try to do something groundbreaking.
So Mandy Rae, you're in the ambulance, sirens on, being rushed to the hospital. Is there any moment where you're thinking, maybe synchronized swimming? It's time to revisit that one. Or you just sort of stayed the path the whole time.
You're thinking, man, what did I do wrong? Because usually it's earned. If you have a blackout, you've done something wrong. And so you're trying to figure out what you did wrong. And the whole process is weird because you're going over what you did all through the dive and you're talking to people, about it. And like, well, this is what I did here and there. And what all the researchers and doctors can figure out is usually it takes a couple weeks for your body to 100% recover from having the flu. And I just didn't have that recovery time. And when so much of freediving is one of only 2 sports in the world there where you have to change your physiology in order to take part in it. And then my physiology was already compromised because of trying to recover from the flu. So it was just bad timing. I shouldn't have been so ambitious. Sometimes you just need to sit back and relax.
But it never made you second guess the sport. You're as soon as you're physically able, you're right back in. Are you ever afraid when you dive? Does fear enter the equation at all, even a little bit?
Not since I got my head into the game. No, never scared of it.
Many extreme athletes say that it's as much mental as it is physical. You talk to ultra long distance runners, the ones doing 50, 100 miles, and they'll say that
they're crazy.
Right, they're crazy, right? But they'll say their legs ran half the miles and their head and heart ran the rest. Do you think it's similar with freediving? There's only so much you can push yourself. And then there's just a mental piece of allowing yourself to be pushed that much further.
Oh, for sure. And you see it in competitions. We host a competition every year in the Cayman Islands, Deja Blue, and you have some people that come year after year and they're great divers, but they never progress past a certain point. And you can see they'll be doing really good. They'll be making increases, getting deeper, and then they hit a certain point where there's always you can tell it's a mental issue rather than a physical issue, why they've stopped where they are. And until you learn that you have to work the mental side of it just as much as the physical, you're always going to have those roadblocks. And it's interesting, I want to say 8 years ago now, PFI, my husband Kirk, started working with Red Bull, and it was to help train their big wave surfers. And now we work with them doing breath hold clinics and that. Even with before the Sochi Olympics, Kirk went down and worked with a handful of, we called them the snow girls, athletes going to the Sochi Olympics that were in snow disciplines, skiing, snowboarding, stuff like that. Because in their sport, it's 1/100th of a second that can make the difference. And you have to learn to train outside of the physical that you're doing in your specific discipline. If you can learn how to eliminate certain fears, allow yourself to mentally just let yourself do stuff, you're going to have that edge over somebody that isn't doing that. And Red Bull's really amazing that way, in that they see that there's all these different ways of training an athlete that don't even pertain to their sport. And so they've started using what we do as a way to show people that they can do the impossible, even though they're already doing what we think is the impossible.
So you think about what separates you from the quote unquote average professional. I know it's not really a professional sport, but expertly trained people doing these competitions that don't have those records. There's this mental aspect we talk about. There's certainly training and how hard you train. There's perhaps maybe some, I don't know, a physiological component of, is one person more adaptable to extreme pressure and oxygen deprivation? Do you feel it's all just the mental aspect, or are there other pieces that, given you all these accolades and not others?
Oh, there's definitely other sides. I think, I know a big thing for me was Kirk. He is the trainer. He's trained 7 people to 23 different world records in the sport, and he works with special forces teams from 3 different countries, Red Bull. He has a way of finding potential in people and figuring out how to bring it out. And I had no intention of ever getting into freediving to do world records. That never crossed my mind. It was just a new fun way to explore the underwater world, and it had a bit of challenge to it. But all of a sudden, we'd be out training, and he'd see me do something and be like, wow, you can do that. How about we try a little bit more? And then all of a sudden it was like, if you train a little bit more from here to there is a world record. And you're like, really? Okay. And he figures out these ways to train people, and he just had this way to get you excited to try the impossible, and can get you there. And so without having someone like that helping me along, I don't think I ever would have pushed it. I have physiological attributes that definitely help. That's a lot of people don't have, but he was able to see those as well and see the potential behind it and help you realize that potential.
Can you give some examples? What physiological aspects are you talking about?
My lung volumes are larger than the average woman, my height and age. I can equalize hands-free, which is a really big benefit. My ears equalize really easily. I don't have to pinch my nose to blow. Sinuses are a different issue with me, but usually I found ways around that. But those 2 things make a big difference. Like if you have bigger capacity to hold air, you can dive deeper, equalize further than the rest of the people. So it's definitely an advantage.
So I was going to ask what drives you to achieve all these records, and it sounds like there was a lot of influence by Kirk, your husband, of course.
Oh yeah.
Did it get to a point where the drive became all internal? It's a fascinating sport. You could simply say, I'm going to go down 50, 100 feet, kick back, enjoy the scenery, just like being weightless and what's around me. But it's a very different level to say, no, I'm going to push myself further and further and deeper than anyone's gone before. And there's got to be a certain intense drive that makes you want to continue to push that envelope.
And it never really felt like that to me. It was never, I gotta do this. It was kind of like, I think I could do this. And then we would come up with a training program and start doing lots of gym training and pool training. And I liked the whole, it was always fun to work out towards it and then see what all of that work ended up being. It didn't seem like a chore at all. I don't know. It was an interesting project. I wonder if I could do this.
Are those goals themselves, these new records, are those what drive you to get up every day and train more because you're sort of reaching toward something tangible? Or is it like, well, whether or not you ever got any records, you just love doing this and that's enough?
I really like the teaching side of it. I really like that. And this was, I don't know, it was just another aspect that really, it made me happy to see that I was able to, there's something in me that likes to know that I can achieve something that I didn't think was possible. Like I never thought that I could do these records, never. But it was like, I'm getting closer and I have someone that wants to train me and I'm going to work my butt off and see if I can make it happen. And then as you get closer, you start getting excited about it. And it's like, wow, I could actually pull this off. And it's like, if you were that close to doing something groundbreaking, how would you not be excited to go and do everything you could to make it happen? It's not something that you would, for me, that I would ever think not to do. It's like, well, I'm close enough. Somebody else thinks I'm close enough. So how can I deny myself, working a little bit harder to do it? It was just a no-brainer.
And so let's talk about, so you have a goal 6 months out to set a new record. What's the training like between now and then? How often are you in the water? Are there any activities you need to do outside the water, whether it's mental things like meditation and mindfulness or running or other ways to keep your body and your mind in shape? Or is it all just going in the water again and again and again?
No, it's very involved. My workouts, I'm up in cold waters and usually, competitions would start up around April, May. So that's putting you right through winter, the coldest part up here. So usually the first, 4 or 5 months was all gym and pool training. So, it would vary in intensity and there's different workouts it would do, but mainly it's getting yourself in really good shape and you're working the hypoxic side of it. We have some special training that we do, like special breathing tables that help you, help your body become more adapted to working with low levels of oxygen and high levels of CO2. So you have those in there. There's a lot of stretching that you do because essentially your lungs are like balloons trapped in a cage. So the more flexible that cage is, the more air you can take in and the more compressible you are at depth. So you're working those, you're swimming lots of lengths in the pool, practicing your equalizing, there's all of that. And then as you get closer to the actual event, I usually wouldn't get into the ocean for depth ones until the last month. Or sometimes the last 3 weeks when I actually got down to the location where I was going to do it. Most of the records were done in the Cayman Islands. And so I would just be doing gym and pool training until I got down there. And then I'd have 3 weeks in which to get myself down to world record depth in the ocean. And by the time you get there, there's no more cardio. You're just riding on what you are and let your body just slow down. And you're just concentrating on just doing the technique and the diving.
And all that work you did to get to that point, are we talking 30 minutes a day, 8 hours a day? How much time are you devoting yourself toward the prep?
Well, I was working full time too. So, it's not like being a fully sponsored athlete where you can spend several hours a day, but it would usually be about 2 hours a day. I'd always have at least one day off. just to relax and chill out. But there is at least, when you're in the gym or the pool, the workouts are at least 2 hours, and then you have your stretching and stuff like that on top of it. So it was a good time commitment. But at that point in time, didn't have any kids, and so it was something fun to do, and we'd both go to the gym together or go to the pool together, and yeah, it was just a fun thing to do after work every day.
You've helped a lot of people learn how to free dive. David Blaine, the famous street magician, you taught him, I believe, or at least were part of the team on his world record 17-minute oxygen breath hold, which he did live on Oprah. And there was no trickery here. This wasn't a magic show. He actually learned to hold his breath that long, which I just still can't fathom how you do that. What was it like working with him? And is that something anyone can do, or was there something really in particular about David that was fairly unusual?
Well, David is he is an exceptional person mentally, for sure. Working with him was neat because when he decides to do something, he's all in, which a lot of people cannot do. And so when you tell him to do something for training, he would do it. We trained him initially for the Drowned Alive event he did in Lincoln Center, where he lived in a glass sphere underwater for 7 days, and we did all the safety for him. And then at the end, he took his final breath of air and held his breath. He was going for the world record, and he had been within a minute of it during training before the event. But after living without solid foods or anything for 7 days, he made it just past 7 minutes before he blacked out. And then it was 2 years later that we did the oxygen breath hold with him on Oprah. And the week before that in training, he made 20 minutes, just over 20 minutes. And the difference in it is breathing up on oxygen. So you're saturating your body. So you can hold your breath way, way longer than if you do it without oxygen beforehand. If you're using just regular air, I should say. But yeah, he's a very determined individual and amazingly fun to work with.
But in this case, you're not at depth. You said before when you're doing these deep dives, then you don't have the urge to breathe. But I'm assuming, a foot or two down, you got the urge. And there's no way between 0 and 17 minutes, you're not just feeling that burning sensation in your lungs. Again, is it back to just mentally being able to go to that point of blacking out? Or are there physiological aspects of David that make him unique?
Well, static apnea, it's a different creature because you're just floating, holding your breath. And so I think of all the freediving disciplines, it's the hardest mentally. It's one thing to swim away from your air source, like in the depth disciplines, but they're very short. My 136 meter no limits dive was only 2.5 minutes. So it's really quick. Whereas static apnea, they're holding for really long periods of time and you're just floating at the surface. Or in David's case, he was standing upright in a sphere, which is actually more uncomfortable, I find, than floating at the surface. Doing little changes like that so that you can be seen like he wanted to, and the sphere was added some difficulty to it for sure. He's very unique in just his drive to overcome the impossible. So, for the 17 minutes, for the first half of it, you wouldn't have any urge to breathe because you've saturated with oxygen. And then as the CO2 starts to build up in your system, you start to get these urges to breathe, and you get they're diaphragmatic contractions. So it's kind of like having the hiccups, but not breathing through it. And the longer you hold your breath, the quicker those come. So you might get them every 15 seconds at the beginning, and then they come every 10, and then pretty soon they're one after the other. And the whole trick with it is trying to ignore them and relax through them. Whereas the natural reaction is to tense up and fight them. And as soon as you tense up, you're activating muscles and using more oxygen, and you can't hold your breath as long. So it's learning how to mentally overcome that and just relax through it. And he was really good at doing that.
I'm literally in pain listening to you, to you describe this. Can anyone be trained to do this? As long as you're driven and you've got that mental toughness. I came to you or Kirk and said, look, I want to go down hundreds of feet, or I want to hold my breath at surface 15, 20 minutes. I can be trained to do that?
Oh, for sure. Like in our intermediate course, people will come in, and the first bit of class we start doing introductions, and we talk about them all doing 4-minute breath holds and diving to 100 feet. And you can see majority of people will be kind of rolling their eyes, and you can hear them thinking, yeah, that might be that guy next to me, but it isn't going to be me. I can hold my breath for maybe 45 seconds. That's it. And the very first pool session that first day, almost everybody will hit 4 minutes. You might have one or two that make it just past 3, but not quite 4. But almost everybody will hit 4 minutes that very first pool session. And it's amazing because they come out of the water and it's like you can see light bulbs above everybody's heads that are like, whoa, I did that. Maybe I can do more. I wonder what's possible for me now. And it really changes everything.
Does the planning, the discipline, the focus that's required in this sport help you in other areas of your life?
For sure. I think, I was a scuba instructor as well. And when I started teaching, and it was cool with scuba because you'd be introducing people to their first time underwater, and they'd be very thankful for that. With freediving, it not only opens people up to the underwater world, but what you see in people is you'll get emails from people saying, oh my God, you've changed my life by showing me freediving. Because kind of like what I was explaining to you, where you can do how could you stop yourself from doing the impossible? Or the students that didn't think they could make 4 minutes and they did their very first pool session. When you have those breakthroughs, it changes you. And all of a sudden you start thinking, wow, okay, I didn't think that was possible, and I did it easily. I wonder what else I can do. And it starts taking over in all aspects of your life. You start learning that you can, if you apply yourself and you think that you can do it, you'll be able to do it. And you start allowing yourself to try new things and to master new things.
So how do you stay motivated? All these world records, national records. Is there something else that's driving you? What's left in your bucket list in life?
Oh, man. Well, I haven't done any records since, my last attempt was in 2009. And then we now have a 7-year-old daughter, and I had back surgery. And I was actually out of the sport for 5 years after my surgery. And getting back into it, I found that I really had missed it. I didn't realize, because I was so busy with the company and with our daughter and everything, I hadn't realized it. But every year I get back in for at least one competition in the Cayman Islands, and those 45 minutes a day where I get to melt into the water and just become one with the ocean again and push myself. And I'm still one of the deepest people at the competition and I don't do as much training. It feels good. It feels really good to know that I could still do it. And I love the process of getting my mind and my body back into it. And that's all that I need for it, really, is just the challenge of doing that. And then I've got the other challenges in the company and with our daughter that egg me on in different ways too. I just kind of find that I like to find my challenges. Doesn't really matter where they are, as long as some part of it has something to do with freediving and being underwater.
Mandy Rae, I can't thank you enough. This has been fascinating for me, and I really appreciate your spending time sharing all these insights.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.